Good evening, and welcome. Hi, we're going to get started so that we can have as much conversation as possible tonight. Thank you so much. Well, it's really my pleasure to welcome everyone tonight to our 20th annual Deans Roundtable discussion. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Jesse Lazar. I'm the Executive Director here at AI New York and the Center for Architecture. We are honored to host this unique forum at the Center for Architecture every fall. Through the years, speakers have explored a diverse range of topics from economic inequality and social resilience to how we can promote diversity in and increase access to architectural education. Recordings of past Deans Roundtables can be found on the Center for Architecture's video library webpage. Tonight, we are thrilled to have 16 deans, chairs, and professors from architecture schools, both nearby and from further afield. This is our largest, yes, great, welcome. This is our largest in-person gathering of speakers at the Deans Roundtable ever, and we're incredibly thankful for their participation in this event. We've had conversations before about what we think is the maximum number that we can fit here, but we have a creative new configuration, so thank you to everybody for multiple levels here. In connection with the 2024 AI New York Chapter President Gregory Schweitzer's presidential theme of belonging and beyond, this dynamic group will be discussing the role of architectural education and how it may build a more equitable and inclusive future. We're particularly mindful that we're living through a very high anxiety period right now. There's a lot of uncertainty going on. And when we were planning this, I'm really pleased that we got to a place of being able to acknowledge that that's what we are experiencing right now and that that is playing out in our institutions of higher learning in particular ways that I'm sure may come up or inflect some of our conversation tonight. So just want to acknowledge that. And I want to now pass things over to Greg to provide a little bit more insight on the topics that will be discussed tonight and to introduce this evening's moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, and good evening. I'm Greg Schweitzer, the 2024 President of AIA New York, and I'm honored to be here today and eager to hear from our esteemed deans, chairs, and professors we have with us here today. As professionals across the industry, all of us here today recognize that by collaborating and exchanging experiences and resources, we can work toward a more equitable and sustainable future for all communities, both locally and globally. In my leadership this year as president, my presidential theme, Belonging and Beyond, calls us to be intentional about inclusion by listening and workshopping ideas worth advocating and amplifying, especially on those areas of affordability, exclusion, displacement, and other patterns preventing people's sustained connection to physical spaces and each other. The Deans Roundtable is an important opportunity for us to discuss how we can empower and amplify the voices of the future generations of architects and design professionals for betterment of the built environment. Our moderator this evening, which was hand-chosen for a reason, Michael Caton, AIA NOMA, is an architect and a product leader who helps advance business models that have scalable impact on the AEC industry. He is a visiting assistant professor at Pratt Institute and was previously head of the technical computing at Juno, a startup accelerating the development of sustainable multifamily buildings with mass timber. Michael serves on the AIA Board of Directors and participated in AIA's inaugural civic leadership program. He was a contributing columnist to the Architect magazine and held academic appointments at Pratt Institute, Columbia University's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation, and the American University of Sharjah. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Over the past year, as part of the Belonging and Belong initiative, Michael participated in a task force focusing on reimagining and developing a framework for rethinking community engagement in architectural practice and in education. advocating for more collaborative and an equitable approach. We're thrilled to have him as our moderator this evening. And without further ado, Michael, it's your show.
Thank you, Greg, for that very generous introduction. I will skip half of my introductory remarks because you so eloquently introduced me to the audience tonight. Thank you so much. So good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Caton, as Greg said, and I'm privileged to be moderating this year's Deans Roundtable. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge Lance J. Brown, who established this vital dialogue 20 years ago, and who, for the first time, won't be with us tonight due to a conflict. There's a special place in my heart for the entrepreneurial spirit in those who see gaps as opportunities and courageously catalyze the change they wish to see. Our presence here tonight, 20 years running, is a testament to Lance's embodiment of that spirit. This event began when I was just a second-year undergraduate architecture student at Pratt Institute, a time when I couldn't have imagined the transformative journey ahead. This is where I'll skip my own little introduction to you all because Greg so eloquently shared a bit about myself. So tonight's conversation feels particularly timely as we examine architectural education through the lens of belonging and beyond. One through-line question will be, how do we prepare the next generation of architects not just to design buildings, but to reshape our profession and to shape and be shaped by community? With our distinguished panel of institutional leaders, we'll explore these questions from multiple angles, from student experience and institutional evolution to community collaboration and engagement. Each leader brings a unique perspective and insights into how architectural education can evolve to meet this moment. So let's begin. As we get started, I would love for each institutional leader just to briefly introduce yourself and the institution that you represent, and we'll get started with our first theme. We can start close to home here on my left. Yeah.
All right, thank you. My name is Sanjeev Vaidya, and I have served as the department chair of the New York City College of Technology's Department of Architecture. I'm pleased to be here. I've done it a few times now. I want to make a quick distinction between my program and my colleague, Dr. Gutman. CUNY, the City University of New York, represents 25 different programs throughout New York City. We're two separate programs within that galaxy of schools, and we're the only two public programs of architecture in New York City. Hi. Okay, sorry. Hi, Andrew Saunders. I'm coming from the Weitzman School of Design at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm the current director of our MArch program. Previous semesters, I've been acting chair and associate chair during the leadership transition there.
Hi, I'm Rhett Russo. I'm the undergraduate chair in the School of Architecture at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which is in Troy, New York. And we have a BArch program of about 350 students located in a technological institute. Nice to be here.
Hello, everyone. Killian Riano. I am the Dean of the School of Architecture at Pratt Institute. We have a Bachelor's of Architecture, Master's of Architecture, 1,200 students, about 10 programs that run the gamut in the in ways to shape the built environment.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kyle Miller. I'm Associate Dean at Syracuse University School of Architecture.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Marta Gutman. I am the Dean of the Spitzer School of Architecture at the City College of New York, at the City University of New York. And as Sanjeev already explained, we are two programs of architecture within the large multiverse of CUNY, which, just to give you some sense of scale, consists of as many people as the city of Newark. So our school consists of about 500 students. We have two professional programs, three actually, in architecture, undergrad and grad, one in landscape architecture, post-professional in urban design, a new undergraduate program in urban studies, about 25 full-time faculty. And before I became a dean, I was a historian, and before I became a historian, I was an architect.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Abimbola Asojo, and I'm the Dean of the School of Architecture and Planning in Morgan State University. Morgan State University is a HBCU located in Baltimore, Maryland. And at my school, we have architecture, we have construction management, we have interior design, landscape architecture, and regional and city planning. We have a total of about 619 students, and we have a NAB accredited architecture program. Thank you.
Is this working? Yes. Hi, I'm Martin Finio, a longtime faculty member at the Yale School of Architecture, very recent associate dean at the Yale School of Architecture. I'm the associate dean for curriculum and admissions. We have about 250 students, MArch 1 and MArch 2 programs, MED program, and a 2-track PhD program.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Trudy Brands. I come from the School of Architecture at the New York Institute of Technology, and we have a program that is over 900 students with undergraduate BArch student, BSAT program, and several master's degrees. So, welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cotter Christian, and I am the Dean of the School of Constructed Environments at Parsons, which is part of the new school, and we can keep going into more layers if we want to. School of Constructed Environments is interior design, product design, lighting design, and of course, architecture. And so this is, yesterday concluded my 4th month in the role, so I'm eager to hear from everyone here and maybe learn some tips.
Good evening. I'm Milton Curry. I'm Senior Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives and Engagement at Cornell, the College of Architecture, Art, and Planning, and former Dean of the University of Southern California Architecture School.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Zerniak. I'm the new Dean at the School of Architecture and Planning at University of Buffalo. And we offer the only Masters of Architecture program in the 64 college and university SUNY system.
Hi, I'm Stephanie San Delgado. I'm an assistant professor of architecture at the School of Public Architecture under the Michael Graves College at Caton University. Unfortunately, our dean couldn't make it because he's sick, so I'm a last-minute replacement.
Good evening, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. My name's Haley Eber. I'm the acting dean at the Cooper Union. I think I have the shortest commute getting here. We are a small school of architecture. Our undergraduate program is around 150. And our graduate program is around 10 students. But we punch way above our weight in terms of our size.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jason Schubach, Leo Sun, Virgo, Moon Rising. Did not land as well as I hoped that would. Okay. It's Friday night. I'm the Dean of the Antoinette Westfall College of Media Arts and Design. We're a comprehensive creative college at Drexel University in Philadelphia. We have about 2,800 students in about 30 different programs, and obviously we have an architecture program.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. So as we can see, we have a very large and esteemed panel of guests this evening. So the plan for tonight is to go through the discussion in really kind of 3 big chunks. The first focusing on the student experience and student voices. The second focused on institutional evolution. And the third about community collaboration and engagement. Given the size of our panel, folks shouldn't feel like everyone should respond to every question. That's not possible. But nonetheless, I'll do my best to kind of bring folks in as we move through the discussion. So to get started with the first theme of student voices and student agency, empowering the next generation of architects. First question is, how can schools create more opportunities for students to engage in community-based projects and gain real-world experience working with diverse populations? And to get us started, once again, I'd actually like to start with my dean, Killian Riano, moderator's privilege.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. You know, one of the things that I've been thinking through is that I've been reading this transcript from 1968, a conversation between Sidney Katz, Peter Eisenman, and Emilio Ambas about the 1968 Pratt student strike. And I love reading that document, their 12 demands. One of the demands was that there wasn't enough connection. First of all, one of the demands was that there's not enough interaction between the schools at Pratt itself, but even within the larger region, that we're not talking to each other enough. But the second one was that there's not enough connection between the curriculum and impact out into the world, including community engagement. I think that students, and some of the things, as I reflect back on that have happened, including our planning department it became very much kind of about community engagement. They work with community groups, they have lists and through the years. So the combination of being able to get students the disciplinary knowledge that they need to for the course and for the moment, while having a long-term relationship with a partner becomes really, really important and helpful, right? Because then the students, there's a relationship that is created that's bigger than the one semester, but the students get to experience as part of their education that process. In the architecture program itself, I think especially recently, there's a lot of effort to work on design build programs as part of an engagement strategy, so that by the students building and working with people, working with, in Red Hook at Ready, with the algae farmers to experiment with creating concrete and cement out of the algae, and then bringing that into a community garden as a structure of understanding where things come from, working with the young people that are working there, and then bringing it into community use. But at the end of the day, for me, I think the important thing is that students are seeking impact in the world and seeing quickly how the work that they produce can have it.
Thank you for that. Just some themes that quickly came up around enduring relationships beyond semester-long engagements, but also students seeking impact. I'm curious, any other deans? Wonderful. Julia, please jump in.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Quinlan. That was a point I wanted to make. I think understanding the community side of the community-led engagement, I think, is really important. And although I've just been at Buffalo a year, it seems like because studios are often, the faculty get shifted each semester or each year, and developing ongoing relations is more challenging, we tend to see this happening through our centers and institutes, of which we have many, and whether it's the Food Lab in planning, or whether it's the Idea Center, which is about universal design. They're developing relationships with the community through real projects that students get involved in, so that they are nurturing this relationship. And so the student body might change, but the players that are helping to plan them and the people that they're involved with, it's ongoing. And I think that's really successful.
I think Sanjeev and I might have a slightly different take on this question. So, and I expect Ambiola will too. So three of us are schools of architecture that are minority-serving institutions. We serve different groups, but we have students who come to us from the communities that we want to serve. And so they bring their life experiences with them, they bring their ambitions, their dreams, their determination to change the world to our school, and it becomes our respective schools, and it becomes our obligation and our duty to respond to them. So I believe that community engagement begins with the student. It begins with the diverse, wonderful group of students who come to us in New York. I think we were chatting about this just a bit before Sanjeev and I before the session began, and by accepting and working and centering community engagement in the curriculum, we in fact are answering what our students expect us to do.
I can add a little bit to that as well. Like in Morgan, one of our strategic goals is to prioritize the community, embed the community priorities in our curriculum. So we always do that. So our studio projects are mostly community engaged, and they're tackling societal challenges within our Baltimore community, because we want to be an anchor institution for the community. And like Martha said, we're serving the students who are coming from the community, so we're working with the problems and also tackling the challenges there.
Can I jump in?
Please do.
So I just think we have to have some real talk too about the complicated relationship and histories between the universities and some of the communities they sit next to. So Drexel was literally built on an urban renewal site, the Black Bottom neighborhood, which was, I mean, everybody knows those histories. It was really, really awful. So when we're talking about working with the community right next to us, we always try to start with that honesty and as a way to help build trust. You can't do this work without having trust. And so, and it also takes investment. I mean, we are literally trying to put money back into the community and to do things for what they want instead of like students coming in and suggesting things that maybe could happen. It's like, listen to them about what they want. But I think just a lot of universities hold a lot of power in places and have abused that power in history in a lot of ways, and you must start with that to do this work the right way. And I don't know if every university has dealt with their history and the way that it should have. I mean, I just like, I want to put that out there. So.
Yeah.
Please, Milton.
Yeah, we at Cornell, we started a course called The Worlds We Make, which is a freshman course that's required for planning, architecture, and art students who are freshmen, and it's about social justice and building frameworks that go across the departments to speak about how much impact students can have as they move on in their careers. I think the challenge is two things. I think one is we've begun to look at the embodied knowledge that's existing both within our students, and then the co-creation of knowledge that has to happen, I think, when you go into communities, that you want to value the knowledge exchange, not come in with a hierarchical, situation. So I think trying to kind of, create an intellectual framework for community engagement. So it certainly feels good for studios to be doing a food pantry in, upstate New York, but how do you really intellectually kind of, situate that within the context of social movements, within the context of, the knowledge that students are bringing, also the personal, recognizing that there's personal discovery. It's not just an intellectual exercise of architecture, but there's personal discoveries and growth that's taking place in our students, and we need to lean into that perspective as well. So kind of two things that we're trying to grapple with.
I think just to kind of build upon this conversation as well, I think institutional investment is critical, especially as like younger faculty trying to make community engaged projects. This is a very kind of long-term relationship that as faculty members you should be making with the community. At Caton, we're Urban Research Institute. We have the Watson Institute, and then there's a whole new community engaged learning fellowship that has emerged to support faculty. But I think the big component also is that we talk a lot about what we can give as architecture schools, but I think we also have to look at from the nonprofit side to make sure that we don't become a burden. We're not bringing 15 students to do architecture stuff and then expect a lot from them. Like, they have a lot on their plate. So part of the relationships that you have to make with communities is also, how are we not just a burden of imposing ourselves within it? Because, they're doing a lot.
So maybe I want to provide a little bit of context and rotate this question around a little bit, starting with what Marta said. Our program in Brooklyn is the largest program of architecture probably at this table. We're 880 students, and the number went up even during the pandemic. We have a very tenuous budget. So I assert to you that actually what a lot of the comments that are coming out here are really about the relevance of architecture. We all prize good design. We want to see that design in our communities. We want to see the design outreaching. But sometimes a lot of the schools go out and dictate and talk about those communities. Well, what happens if those communities come back into the school? And that's our demographic. In the last 5 weeks of this semester, I've already met with 4 students. 3 were homeless, 2 suffered from domestic abuse, 1 had no job, no income, didn't have papers. This is reality. This is the reality that I'm trying to, and I think Marta and Abimbola, we're trying to figure out, where does architecture and design fit in this environment of academic education? Because our program is public. We have 3 degrees, a 2-year degree, which we call a safety net, 4-year degree, and now a 5-year accredited degree. And I'm going to blow all of you out of the water. This setup is from probably tuition rate up. Our 5-year degree is at no cost. We have the ASAP program and the ACE program, which covers all 5 years at no cost to students. It provides an academic advisor, it provides books, it provides a MetroCard. So I assert that we are a grand experiment in the relevancy of architecture, because that is a rare thing, to open this up to the general public, invite them in and say, design belongs to everybody. And I think that's a pretty important idea.
That's quite powerful, and maybe we're shifting a little bit into our second theme a little bit around institutional evolution. But just one thing I wanted to tease out here, this notion that just came up around embodied knowledge and knowledge co-creation. And I would love if some of the institutional leaders on stage here can expand a little bit on how that's manifests itself, through the student experience, how that's evolved for the student experience. Because on the one hand, students in many ways come to academic institutions to, in some ways, receive knowledge, of course, but what we're talking about with engaging community is about respecting and holding precious, right? The knowledge of community and the process of co-creation is part of the education of architects. So if there are some specific examples that folks maybe can share about like how that's shown up for their students. Please.
Sure. So I mean, I think that's so important because we can't expect students to go out and co-create with a community if they can't collaborate with each other. And I think as faculty, if we also can't collaborate with one another in an effective way, we're not modeling the type of behavior that we want our students to project when they're going in and working with communities. And I take your point. Our tuition is somewhere around $60,000 a year. So clearly our students are coming from a demographic that is perhaps removed from some of the challenges that we see, and those gaps keep getting bigger. And I think it's a lot for us to ask our students to go out and engage with a community without being able to address some of the challenges and issues that they may have, and also to raise questions and feel like they can. Because I think if we create a classroom environment where students don't feel like they can ask difficult questions, they feel like there's a hierarchy in the room that has been established through years of design education, then we're not going to be able to have the important kinds of conversations we need to have with communities.
I think at University of Buffalo, it's a little different equation. So our tuition's $9,000. $9,000. And but most of our students come from New York State, right, as a state public institutions, many of which come from Western New York, many of which come from the city of Buffalo, who grew up there. So they have way more to bring to the table about what community is than most of the faculty, meaning that they're the ones with the knowledge. We had a student-initiated group called Double ASAP. It's African American students of the School of Architecture and Planning. And they planned their own graduation. They brought community affiliates with whom they've had relationships through their high school years. And I'll tell you that it was us at school, the school's faculty, who gained from that relationship because of the long-term kind of nurturing that they had. So I think it really depends on your student bodies, where they're coming from, because ours deeply knew the communities in which they were working.
Mm-hmm.
So if I may say, one of the things that I think is important to remember is that equity and inclusion doesn't only refers to the color of your skin or anything like that, but rather socioeconomical diversity. And at NYIT, we actually have a lot of that. So our students don't come from one specific socioeconomic background, but actually there is the diversity in that in our school. And I think this is very important for students to actually engage with one another and try to understand each other's circumstances, and that we are not isolated from each other's experiences. So that brings a great deal to the table and allows them to, collaborate together in projects that perhaps are in assistance to a particular group. The other point that I would like to make is that it's very important that we understand that we are not going to communities to help them or save them, right? We need to understand that we are part of a community as a whole, global, not just local, not just New York or the United States, but rather as a global community, and things that happen in Haiti actually affect us. And so if we don't start thinking about our own little silos, I think that is a little bit problematic. NYT is one of the most diverse schools in New York, and that's our strength, is our gift, right? We almost received this, right? And so now it's our job to say, what do we do with this fantastic gift? How do we care for it, and how do we grow something beautiful from it?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just been interesting to hear about this term community and how it's getting used, and somehow it feels loaded, and then it gets, I don't know, unloaded. And I think, again, to your point, that, we are all part of a community. And I know, you probably don't think about it when you think of Yale, but Yale has, our student body is over 30 different countries are represented there, a huge array of academic backgrounds and social economic backgrounds. Our dean is working actually tirelessly while she's not here, is because her goal is to make the school debt-free to all students. And so, that's what we need to do as these higher levels of education, is make it accessible in ways that it just hasn't been before. But that means that everything has to change, so that it's one thing to allow students that aren't familiar with that kind of community to be there, but then there has to be the support system to allow them to thrive there. And that's something that I think we need to continually work on, because I've seen us fail at that, and it's a horrible thing. And so I think we've got, we're working on one half of the equation. We really need to work on that other half.
Please,
I
Martha.
wanted to come back to Milton Curry's point about co-creation of knowledge, because I think it's critical. And I just would share a story, a bit of a story about two community engagement projects that are ongoing at Spitzer, and they're faculty-driven. We hire faculty who want to work with communities, so part of the way of embedding community engagement in the curriculum is, in fact, to hire people who want to work that way. So there's one project that we've received support from the Mellon Foundation on, which is a place memory and culture incubator in Harlem. It's a very generous grant that Jerome Hayford and I, working with Sean Weiss and others on the faculty, have launched. And it's been a sobering experience, particularly for me, to understand through the creation of community partners for that grant, to understand how much City College is understood to be a place of privilege within the Harlem community. And how much convincing I had to do with people who I've since become very close with, that we were not out to take them for a ride, that we were actually coming to them because we wanted to co-create knowledge with them, because we wanted to sit down at the table and hear what they had to say about how they believed projects should be generated with memory, culture, history, and the like in mind. And I think it's been pretty successful, but it has been a definite learning experience. That hill is steep, whether Columbia sits at the top of it or City College does. So that's one point to make. And another point, we've been hearing exploitation, written histories of community relations over the course of our country's problematic history. We could go back forever, but we could just say start with the urban crisis and take it from there. But one of the positions that what we are able to compensate community partners for every iota, every minute of time, thanks to the Mellon Foundation. And that's a game changer, because we are not exploiting in the interest of gaining knowledge that we are not then, we think that we are not then returning. And so there's a very practical piece here, like you need the money to do it, and you need that respect and finance come together. And so I would say that's one project. We also build community partnerships with our partners in the North Bronx, working with the Bronx Borough President's Office. That's faculty generated, supported by the Bronx chapter of the AIA, I have to say, and other groups as well. We also work with the great immigrant advocacy group in New York, Make the Road New York, on developing housing projects in the outer boroughs. And then, of course, we have the Bond Center, which creates that sustained, years-long, decades-long framework for engagement that sits outside of Spitzer's curriculum. It's an independent center, but we work closely together. So I think you need a lot of irons in the fire, and you need the people with money, whether you're Yale or whether you're us, or in between, to step up and support us. And I would also say to my colleagues in the profession that we need you to support us as well. We need you to give us the internships, the scholarships, the mentorships, the backing to make these great projects happen, because we cannot do it on our own. We don't have the money. We have plenty of will, we have plenty of ideas, but we need that support. It's a practical matter for me. It's as much as it is an intellectual, pedagogical, and ideological.
Well, I really need to bring Haley in here. She's been very patient.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, we don't have a line of sight, so I've been. I had quite a few points to respond to, but let me just jump on the last one, which is we do a lot of collaborations with community entities, and we don't have the money to do it. We just make these partnerships, and somehow so. Our affordable housing studio works with Help USA that manages a lot of the shelters. We have a course that we collaborate with the engineering school. It's called Data Science for Social Good, and we use generative algorithms based with a lot of nonprofits in the city to help them. We've got electives with Bread and Puppet, which is a political puppeteering company that does social activist work. So I also want to say, we don't go out and find funding for these things. These are pedagogical collaborations. We work with these organizations and institutions, and the output is really incredible. I also just want to jump on Martin's point about accessibility and debunk the theory that fees are increasing as you rise here. The Cooper Union was founded on the principle that education should be as free as air and water. And we've been a tuition-free school for many years until recently, and we are on our pathway back to free. We launched the semester with the announcement that all our senior class will be free for the next 3 years, and after that, we will go back to full tuition. So I think, and we also had the first public reading room, which is now our library, which was just a kind of space for immigrants to come in and read the newspaper. So I think just bringing the public in, bringing our communities in, whether it's through our Saturday program, through our admissions process, is so important. And I think that's really the mission that we're striving for at the moment.
As we continue the conversation, I do just want to note for the audience, we've been joined by Dean Gabrielle Esperdi from NJIT.
One of the things that's been interesting at the New Jersey Institute of Technology is that with a new president coming in, we went through a new strategic plan, and for the first time in the history of the university, engaged community is one of the priorities of the strategic plan. Prior to this, the university actually referred to Newark as its host city, and I had to observe that, we're not the Olympics. This is our home city, and one of the things that's been very positive with that shift is that there's been a recognition that the Hillier College of Architecture and Design is already doing the work of engaged community. And so it's been exciting for us to finally be able to take the lead on something as the plus or the A in a polytechnic, STEM plus or STEAM. It's nice that folks are now turning to us to say, you've been doing forms of engaged community through your 50-some-odd year history. And for us, it's about making sure that it's woven through as many parts of the undergraduate and graduate curriculum as we can. For many years, we had a second-year design build in architecture that was, it was good for the students. It was a masonry build, but it simply produced these kind of formal pavilions that didn't really have any kind of program. And post-pandemic, we've rebooted the second-year design build, explicitly making it into community partnerships. And so this year, for the first time, just a stick-built series of parklets. And although they ultimately didn't end up going to the parks because of complicated relationships with the city, all of the students had the opportunity to work very closely with community members and with a specific Newark artist who was affiliated with those communities. So slowly but surely, we're trying to weave these things into every part of the curriculum. So thank you.
So I want to highlight two things that we're grappling with, also I think slightly novel. First is recognizing that, especially with our socioeconomic demographic of student is that good design doesn't happen in a vacuum. And the time we have with our students, the 2 years, the 4 years, the 5 year, is not enough time to bring them up to speed to compete with a lot of the other programs that we see here. In recognition of that, we have partnered with 12 different public high schools. The high school programs are incredibly important to look at as a place to start building support for public institutions, for good design, for how design impacts your local community. And I think that's a really important area that often gets overlooked, because that is where you see socioeconomic imbalances. Students that come out of high school with strong portfolios, with strong skills, sometimes aren't fighting the same battles that the students we get. But there is no difference in talent. Talent is ubiquitous. It is how you grow that talent that matters. And where the finances are weakest is where we see these students struggling to get a foothold into design. The second program I want to highlight, and Dr. Sutton is here to critique me, is the Art Scholars Program, where we have made outreach to residents of New York City Housing Authority in our community. They come to our school. It started with City Tech, so I want to give props out to Professor Naomi Langer-Voss, who started this with her husband at FX Collaborative. Now we've got the graces of Dr. Sutton to overlook this program, to be a part of it with NYU as well. And that is a really important model of NYU Parsons to bring students together with architecture students together with residents of these homes, these housing projects, to start to build answers. And I think that's a really model project that I believe is going to gain a lot more strength in the coming years.
Can I just jump in here? Sorry, back here behind. Oh, go, please.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you haven't spoken yet. Go ahead.
I mean, something that occurred to me is that, at Syracuse, I don't find that we are particularly well connected to the community, and that's for various reasons. One being that most of our students, 99% of them, have probably never been there, are not from there, and I think it takes them time to understand the community, its history, the people, the challenges. And I think, as is mentioned, there's a short time for them to acquire that information and then have to turn around and demonstrate the value of design to that community. I think something that our students are increasingly eager to do is have a positive impact in the communities that they will then go and work within, or when they're working on projects that are commissioned to be designed in places even that the office is not. And so I think a lot of our investment has been the longer term training that we provide to students to help them to move the dial when they show up in practice, and help them, as has been pleaded for here, to help practice evolve and become more reliable community partners. Most of architecture is an instrument of wealth creation, by default. And I think a lot of our students are not comfortable with that, and I think they want to use design and the skills that they acquire as designers, which no other person acquires, because other than architecture students, and to bring that and find reliable partners that have other skills and other expertises to make a positive impact through professional work. And so it's been tough for me to jump into the conversation, because I think in Syracuse we have challenges, but it's more of the impact that the students want to make well beyond the time that they leave Syracuse.
So Jason, I know you want to jump in, but maybe just to crowdsource a little bit, because we've been talking in different responses about various tactics, but this notion of pedagogical partnerships has been really important throughout. And I was curious if you all, any of you can share for each other, what have been some of the 10X, the super effective strategies that you've used as an institution to develop those really strong partnerships?
I was literally going to talk about that. So.
Perfect.
And by the way, I just flew in from Dubai, so if you want to talk architecture and money, girl. It was a lot. So Drexel 15 years ago declared that it was going to be the most civically engaged university in the country. So we actually have built a lot of these platforms. I would say there's three really critical ones. One, every student in the whole university has to take a course in what it means to do community engaged work. So a lot about economics, politics, all that stuff. 2, we have a whole center that does nothing but support students and faculty in doing co-created work with communities. So they have deep trust and relationships with community. The projects and classes are driven by the community. And we've attracted a lot of faculty who have done that work for years. And 3, and this is one I really love, is we actually pay resident community members to come and be residents in our colleges. And we had this at ASU too. We had the Indigenous elder in our design school, which was kind of like an amazing thing. But like literally they're in the room, right? When we're making decisions about things. And so, I mean, I'm happy to talk more about that stuff to anybody, but there's a lot of experience there. It has not been easy. It is still extremely bumpy. And go back to Martha, excuse me, it takes dollar bills, you know? I mean, and right now, if you might have noticed, higher ed's kind of having a financial crisis, so I'm worried this is the first stuff that's gonna get cut, right? Because it's not seen as essential, so.
Well, I just want to talk about some of the things that we've done that I think have been successful in terms of these kinds of projects. I mean, community is a loaded word. I think in the sense that like what you mentioned, Kyle, a lot of our students don't come from our community. They come to the Capital Region to study at RPI. And what's been interesting is to see problems in the region that are emerging. The refugee crisis, adaptive reuse, a lot of aging infrastructure, aging buildings, that those problems that people are galvanizing around those kinds of issues, and they're really invested in reaching out to universities such as ours who can bring conversation to the table, but also bring interdisciplinary expertise. What has been really, really productive, I think, for us and surprising for me, you know, I spend a lot of time working with organizations. Some of the best relationships we've had have been people that have called me, sent me an email and said, hey, you know, we saw this set of projects that your students did. We also have a church, and we have a problem that we need to think about using it for a refugee center and to convert it. Would you like to work with us? So those kinds of relationships are really great for pedagogy because they open up a kind of ambiguity around what is the question of what should be designed. So much of the education that has been put forth to students in professional programs is given to them as a kind of skill building situation, but the ambiguity of going to a client who doesn't know what to do and doesn't really have the questions framed properly so that there's a conversation that can emerge has been incredibly powerful. But I think the other thing that a lot of this discussion around financing, some of the things that have emerged are really about how nonprofits can use, work with universities, work with faculty on their research to put grants together for funding. And the students and the expertise that the universities have can leverage packages that can go forward in the community to gain financing. And that is supported, in our case, by an institution that has a very, very strong affiliation with Case New York, Center for Architecture, Science, and Ecology, who can bring analysis and data to the table that can change the bottom line. The buildings can begin to generate energy. We can think about geothermal. We can think about a whole bunch of different ways to make the projects profitable on their and finance. You know, we can finance things in the long term, but that really has to, I think, be a collaboration between both offices who can bring some other expertise, and that we did have other local offices working with us, as well as other disciplines. And this question right now that's emerging around AI and how do we bring this into the mix, I think this is the place. I think how do we use these kinds of open-ended questions to find the next set of solutions for these kinds of problems and to put business models in place that are not reliant on the funding coming later. The funding is part of the game. And this has been something that I think is really going to gain a lot of momentum in the future.
I hope so.
Okay.
Keely.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, so a couple of things. Number one, I think that different moments in, and I sometimes meditate that different moments in a person's career in education are gonna require different kinds of relationships. So for example, a course studio might have a different kind. It might be bringing about fellow designers that are out there working with communities and exposing that to students. I've been thinking the way we've been doing integrated design, and we bring people for structures, for systems, engagement, and someone that can really think, and especially for students that may not be from the communities and may not even sometimes understand even the racial dynamics of the US and how important that is, because those things are part of design. So from that all the way to hiring community group leaders as part of faculty, we've done that. I think that's an incredibly powerful tool. And everything between, you know, shorter ones, we invite folks to come and give lectures and participate as part of that. I wanted to give, though, a word for, because we're talking about community as this amorphous thing, and as the civic. Civic and public, to me, are incredibly important groups to be working with. The same way that we all, I think that although our tuitions are different, we probably all have budget issues. And none of our budgets are like, none of us are flush with cash, right? And city government is in a very similar place. I've worked for the DDC, so I kind of love the government, I love the DDC, because it's incredibly important to know how to work there. They are at the end of the day, we serve communities, they serve communities. So with our support, working with those groups of people and really bringing civic architects, I think is incredibly important. And the last point that I wanted to make is that I think that in order to even make this even better at schools, we need to talk about peer review, the promotion process. Because often the promotion process does not value or validate that kind of work when it comes to tenure.
Well, thank you for that. Well, I'll bring you in 1 second, Milton, but just for the audience, just want to note, we've basically kind of drifted into our second theme, which has been great. I love the organic nature of this conversation. So we started off speaking about really student voices and student agency and began to roll into the evolution of the academy, which is great. So just want to note that for folks, and we'll continue in that theme moving forward. But Milton, please.
Yeah, I want to make two points. One is, I think, so at Cornell we have an engaged college model. We have a Einhorn Engaged Center, which is on our campus. It was endowed, so each college has a grant. We have a grant of about $600,000 to embed engaged work into our curriculum and also research. So we have grants, we have for faculty and students, we have the course that I mentioned that's an undergraduate required freshman course, and then we're building kind of on that framework courses that are in the sophomore, junior level. And I wanted to say, we have faculty who I think, what I think is interesting is we have faculty who are very research focused in the tech area who are leaning into a framework of community engagement. So for example, Felix Eisel, the Circular Economy Lab, is working with Ithaca Reuse around a mandated reuse of building materials when buildings are torn down. We have Leslie Locke, who's working with Bamboo internationally and in different communities. So I like the fact that our technologists are not purely technologists, they're working to really meld that with community. And then I wanted to say also that I think it's great that we're all doing this, but I think we're also working from a corrective model, right? Why are communities not flourishing in terms of the resources to do what they need to do? We're working on a corrective model. We used to have design centers, which was more of a pro bono model. But as a profession, it's problematic, I think, when we're working from behind. And that seems to be where we are and where we continue to be. So I think rethinking, I don't know if it's rethinking the profession or if it's realizing what our value is, what our agency is, and being frank with our students about what they can expect in the profession. And if they want to expand their agency, engagement is one aspect and one way to do it, but there are other ways as well. Real estate development, politics, there's a number of other ways. So I think I think engagement is important, but it also feels like it's a corrective model, playing from behind. And also, a lot of times we go out in these communities, and our students don't reflect the diversity of the communities, which is another issue we might get to. But I think those are important points as we're all fighting the good fight, but I think we're fighting a little bit from behind.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, no, I think this question about civic and public, especially because I'm in the School of Public Architecture, something we discuss a lot, especially because we are a baby program that's only 9 years old within kind of the scope of architecture schools across the country. And one thing that we've been going since we got initial accreditation is that we're doing these curriculum working groups right now, and in every single one, history and theory, representation, building system, technology, we keep asking this question, it's like, what does it mean to be the School of Public Architecture, and how does our history reflect it? How does our studios reflect it? How does building systems reflect this idea of it? And when does it matter and when does it, right? There are skills and techniques that students need to know. But at the same time, like if we are going to celebrate that we are about the public and we are about civicness, how does that show up in our curriculum more than just once? How does it show up as something there's almost redundancy within our system to reinforce these ideas that it's important after you graduate to think about these issues when you're in practice?
So there's a part of your question here that I want to talk a little about, and I think you mentioned this. It was about dismantling systemic barriers to historically underrepresented backgrounds, and I think a response to that would be to start earlier. And building on your point about being in the public school system, one thing that is happening at Buffalo is that we're starting to partnership with a not-for-profit that has run a summer program for kids to explore potentially architecture, but it's actually also just the trades of the building profession and learning good craft relative to entering the building profession. So their off-ramp might not actually be in college. It might actually be in building up the fields that we need to thrive as in our own field. And I think going back to Marta's point, and in fact, it's why I'm here in New York, because I've been meeting with donors to make this happen, is that we pay the students stipends. Because the only way they are allowed to do this with us in the summer, as opposed to getting a summer job, is to be able to give them support to explore it. And this has been going on for a few years with this non-for-profit. It'll be the first year that the university is going to start to partner with them. But also going back to what's going on at Penn, the Netter Center and the whole idea of the university-assisted public school is something that I know University of Buffalo is investing in relative to building a university-assisted public school on one of our campuses to be able to do these sorts of things. So just two thoughts.
I want to bring Abimbola into the...
I wanted to talk a little bit about, as people were speaking, I was reflecting on the fact that only this semester alone, I think I've written about 6 grants. Because money, we need money. I didn't think as the dean, I would still be writing a lot of grants, but I have to show by leadership as well. And again, my experience in academia is if you want to deliver the project, you have to find the money yourself as well. Because when I was in Minnesota, the architecture program there wasn't diverse at all. It would only be maybe 1 black student in the class and a few international students in the class. So in order to broaden participation, you have to really have those K-12 programs to bring kids into the architecture school. We started with maybe like $500 from Target Foundation. Minnesota, Target owns, they're a big company there. They would just give us like a little $500, and that's all you have to do a camp. So I got really creative. We looked at the intersection of design and math. Once we did that, we were funded by NEA, we were funded by Best Buy, we were funded, and one of the grants I wrote recently in Morgan, because I've also implemented that program in Morgan, Honda, who will think Honda will fund architecture? But I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Our foundation person tells us it's a good grant, so maybe we'll get some funding there. I just wanted to underscore the importance of that. And the other thing too is that the asset-based approach, knowing that the communities too can collaborate with us on the grants. Some of the grants, the one I submitted one about 2 days ago. Fingers crossed, I don't know if we'll get funded, but it was a clean energy grant with a community partner. We're trying to pilot like a smart tiny home prototype in our school and study indoor air quality, because the community where where our institution is in has one of the poorest environmental quality. So we're just trying to see how we can tackle some of those challenges and also try to get funding that way. But recognizing that some of these grants we're co-applying with the community too, so it's not just us, because some funding agencies are looking at that. If it's just the university, they already think the universities are rich. Some universities come with lots of endowments too, so they have funding. So that's what I just wanted to add to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Marta, please.
I wanted to follow up on that and also on a comment about thinking about what we mean by community. And I think it's critical if we expect or want to answer our students' desire to engage with communities in which they live and work, that we also think and work to build communities within our schools. And it's been the topic we've been touching on, but at Spitzer, that's been a big goal. And there's some colleagues up there in the peanut gallery, and they can attest that it's been something that I've worked really hard to make happen at Spitzer, or to foster at Spitzer. And so I just offer, if we can work together and figure out how we can work together to build community within the school, I think we can create better empowered students who are better empowered to become professionals, but also to find the kind of stasis within themselves to go out and collaborate with others as well. And so the few examples I would offer here is that we started a JEDI committee at Spitzer. At this point, we're the only, have the only JEDI committee, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion committee in the, at City College, I think, and probably at CUNY, I'm not sure, but maybe you guys have one. But that models community by representing every group in the school, faculty, staff, and students together participate, right? And we build from that their recommendations to create programs. We definitely engage in design build, both within the school, projects that students work on to advance their various technical skills within the school, but also they learn to work together, they learn to raise money, they learn to work with, they learn how to build, how to collaborate, how to work with patrons. And so one project that came out of this idea, out of this goal, is a project in which our students built a community center or a community space for another division at City College. It was huge. And that project was funded. That project was in a studio. It was designed and built within the course of the semester. The dean of the Humanities and Arts Division was the client. It was a great, great project, and something came out of it that can be used. That project was funded by a grant that came from the Department of Education Hispanic Serving Institutions program to advance mentoring and connection in HSIs. And so we use that grant also to build mentoring programs within Spitzer that run peer-to-peer within our school and also extend out into the profession. So I think those are what, 3 examples of the ways in which community within the school can be fostered, and then, and then from that gives the students an emotional, intellectual, and practical base from which to do their grander visions outside. It's really important.
Those are wonderful examples. Thank you so much. I want to bring in Trudy, please.
No, I think that's a great point, and I'll build up on it. I think the idea of self-efficacy is very, very important. The belief that you can actually do something for yourself. I think that, personally, I can attest to that. I'm actually an NYT graduate, and I can say that if you don't have the power to build that in your students, then it becomes very difficult to build the community. One of the things that Dean Perbalini is doing at the School of Architecture is that she has worked tirelessly with our alumni. So we have an organization called Friends of Architecture, which is alumni from NYIT, School of Architecture, and every year they raise money that goes back into funding scholarships for our students. Last year we raised over $400,000 with her initiative, and so we have an event every year that alumni are invited, and we all participate as a community. And I think that it's very important to build up on that community sense, in the sense that you can actually help yourselves, right? And in entrepreneurship and self-efficacy, believing that we can actually help our students do that is very, very important.
Absolutely. Andrew?
Thanks. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of things coming up. One of the questions earlier was about where this happens in the curriculum or if it doesn't. And I've heard studio come up a few times. And I'll just talk at the Weitzman School of Design, which recently changed its name about 6 years ago. There's a few things that have kind of shifted. One, we have a really unique program, our arm of the school, which is Penn Praxis, and it had been there for a while, but it's essentially the applied research, engagement, and practice arm of the school. And with the Weitzman endowment, has really activated a lot of that. Funding has kind of channeled into Penn Praxis, where it's become an arena for engagement. And also, there's new design fellow scholarships that come from that, so allow all the students to be research assistants. So one has to come to Penn Praxis with funded research, but then it supports the students being involved into it. And I think, working in both studios and then working in Penn Praxis, for instance, working with the community library has allowed us to kind of fabricate and install a pretty large project there over the course of about 2 years, which takes much longer than a studio time, and allows students to kind of engage in a completely different way than without the kind of studio requirements and necessities. In the studio, though, for instance, our second-year housing projects, we have about 6 sections. Now we're requiring that they have a public commons program, and each one of the faculty can choose their own site where they want to locate it, but they have to seek out a stakeholder that would come into the school and start to understand the public commons and how that works. So those are some of the ways we've been working, but it's interesting to compare ones that are in a curriculum that moves at a rapid pace, or others that allow a bit more of longevity in terms of building relationships. Yep.
Please.
Maybe it's. I've been sitting here quiet because I think maybe it's just too obvious to say, but one of the things that we do at Yale is almost all of our work happens in teams. Students don't work alone. They learn to work together. The other thing that I think is important is that we talk about the how are we giving students more agency, but I think we also have to talk about how are we giving architects more agency, or students of architecture more agency. One of the ways I think that's important, not only working in pairs or in teams, but having faculty that aren't architects, having anthropologists teaching architects, having developers actually teaching architects, so that architects gain agency in understanding how the money works. Who is making architecture? Who should be making architecture? And when I say that, I mean in terms of who's funding it, how is it funded, how then with that knowledge do you create agency? We also, Yale's had a 60-year legacy with the building project, where we are building housing in New Haven. We build a house a year. I don't know quite how it happens, but it does. And also, I know that Yale is maybe in a different place in terms of what we're capable of doing with our students, but travel is such an important component of the way that we are working with our students. Bringing them to places where they wouldn't normally be able to be, teaching them. I think you mentioned this idea that we are not saving anybody wherever we go, but we can learn how to be more empathic architects by being in different places in the world and having to engage with communities that are unlike any of ours, like where the rug is pulled out from under my feet as much as the students. I've been co-teaching with Francis Carré for 3 years now, and we've taken our students to different countries in Western Africa. But it's one thing to be in Western Africa, but it's also another one to be working with this architect who was born in Burkina Faso, is practicing in Germany, but has developed a way in which he has empowered the community to build the work that he is capable of designing. So, or he's designing work in a way that enables a community to build it. So I think these are the ways. So there's just, it has to come from so many different places. It has to come from the money side. It has to come from the community side. It has to come from outside of the architectural faculty side. I think we can't stop.
We cannot.
Yeah, if I would just like to comment on those 2 points. One is Martha's idea of building community from within, which is so important. We kind of see the institution as a kind of home, right? How do you create belonging and a sense of make everyone welcome? What we started doing is a couple of things. One is we do a community breakfast on a Thursday. Every Thursday we have a breakfast. And this actually came out of, one, building community, but two, realizing food insecurity is a big thing amongst our students. This is kind of sometimes the only real meal that they eat once a week. So we started the community breakfast. We started architecture community dinners. We do that once a semester. We started that last year when things on campus were very stressful, and we realized coming together to break bread would be an incredible moment for the community to have a little bit of empathy and listen to each other and have conversations. So the idea of kind of starting community, and there's a lot of examples, somehow they all revolve around food, but food is it helps. It's a kind of, yeah, we're here for it. And then just a point on the student agency question. I think for us, yes, how do we empower students? And I think the one thing that we really do, and I think is fundamental, is student governance and the student participation in the governance of the school. So at Cooper, all our students sit on all our standing committees, whether it's admissions, curriculum, dean search, any of the academic standards. They all have an equal vote to full-time faculty. In fact, we've even expanded the committees, and now we have 2 students out of 7 with an equal vote to our full-time tenure faculty. And I think modeling the democratic practices within the institution that students can take out, I think, and that trickles down to student teaching, mentorship, but it really starts out with governance and participation in that component of the school.
Gabrielle, please.
Yeah, let me follow up on that notion of empowering students, because I think there's a kind of subtlety that we sometimes forget, which is the way in which our teaching, the content of our teaching, the location of our projects can sometimes reinforce a certain hierarchy of place in our students, and that we need to be careful that they begin to think that the places that they come from matter as sites for architecture and design. And I think that's one of the things that we really try to do, is to make them realize. I mean, most of our students are from New Jersey. Most of them are going back to the towns that they came from, even if they practice kind of in the sort of larger region. And if they are consistently told that architecture only happens, fill in the blank, across the Hudson, in Europe, that becomes a kind of reinforcing of a false hierarchy, and it sort of they begin to internalize that, and to think that architecture happens elsewhere, rather than that they are empowered to go back to their own communities and transform what they find there. And I just think that needed to be added.
Thank you. Please.
So some of the really basic skills that we are encouraging our students, and we have a unique position because our program really comes out of World War II. We are a GI Bill funded program that was training veterans in the 50s to do carpentry and plumbing. And so that actually puts us in a quite novel position where we're not beholden to any kind of legacy of pedagogy or curricula. It changes with technology. It changes with our adjunct-heavy faculty. But there are 2 things that I think are really interesting that we are focusing on as a faculty, and one is listening skills. I think I heard that mentioned here, and I think that's a really important skill for architects, for designers, and people who go out and work in the community. So we have set up a system to enhance our students' communication skills, writing, speaking, public speaking, all of them hate to, I think of all 880 students, I don't think there's one that likes to talk in front of any kind of an audience. But listening is the one that's the hardest to really calibrate pedagogy to, because architects are always talking. And then the other part of it is simply financial literacy. So we now offer a business minor, and I have been encouraging and pushing students to get involved in that. Why? Because simply most of our students don't know the value of their own time. And that is a massive deficit that happens whether it's an underserved community like ours, but also within the profession, how to value your time, what is your hourly rate, what is it worth to a client. And I think that's a really important starting point for our students. And it's not something I got in school at all, but I got it by listening to these students and hearing that they were really at a loss. And when they graduate, they basically are plunged into an abyss where they become cheap labor and they become used. And that's a really big problem for our students.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit, another kind of creating community programs. So at our college, majority white faculty, so for our diverse students, we were studying, at post-George Floyd's murder, we started really looking at the facts. And if you were a first generation or a student of color in our school, you were graduating at a 20% rate. If you were a black student, you were graduating at a 50% less rate. Facts. So we created this program called Bridge, which created community amongst those students and also provides funds to them for a lot of the hidden costs, right? Like architecture schools require a lot of really expensive stuff. Like they show up and they're like, I have to pay $500 for, studio materials. I didn't know that. And so we fund that kind of thing. There's a lot of we have a program called We Care that provides like a different kind of counseling from just the university counseling specifically for those kinds of students. And I will say, not only for the students of color, but for the first generation students, they get the first generation students get lost in the mix a lot in a lot of the colleges. And to call them out as also as important and needing of community was a really important thing for us. So I'm happy to report that we just graduated our first generation of Bridge students at a 98% retention rate, which was amazing. But it just took a lot of care and community building where people felt like they could find each other, that they had community, they had a space where they belonged. And it was very intentional, and I'm happy to share how it worked. So it's just an idea.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I actually do want us to unpack a little tension that I'm actually sensing in the conversation around something, Kyle, that you mentioned around students' lack of interest in architecture as an instrument for wealth creation, but also some comments, Marta, that you mentioned about hiring faculty that's interested in working in a kind of community-oriented way, but also comments, right, Killian, that you made around that we need to talk about promotion and tenure priorities, right, and that in many ways this type of work isn't maybe prioritized in those discussions. Then there was a bit of a silent amen here in the corner. So can we talk a little bit about, we've had a robust conversation about, right, more community engaged work, but the central, how we shift the focus or somehow, insofar as this is the interest, advance that higher up the priorities list in terms of, what is core to an architect's education.
I think it's worth remembering that the AIA's notion of the citizen architect, and we've had folks quite successfully use that as the kind of center of their promotion and tenure package, and arguing that this is something that is recognized by the AIA, this is what it means to be a citizen architect, this is the kind of work that you do, and that's been convincing, and I think it's something to kind of fall back on.
I would say as a fourth-year tenure track faculty member in the panel, I think that hit in the gut. I was like, oh, damn, yeah. It's because I think a lot of time we're supposed to kind of hit all of these milestones, but these community-engaged practices take such a long time that you're supposed to be producing and you're supposed to be getting your name out there and people to recognize you, but those things take time. And so this idea of balancing kind of the short outcomes with kind of long-term outcomes becomes super critical in the amount of time that you have as kind of a tenure track faculty.
One of the things that drew me to the new school was, or to Parsons, is that it's part of the new school. And the new school has a kind of long history of social justice and activism. And I think that we have a lot to learn from our colleagues across the institution, and I think a lot of your programs are nested within a larger university, and there's folks doing community engaged work in their fields and successfully getting tenure and successfully advancing, and also have really great relationships with communities. And so I think enabling whatever that looks like at your institution to reduce some of the friction that is involved in collaborating with colleagues across the university as a whole would go a long way in solving some of the issues around faculty appointment, but also the work with connecting with community.
Yeah, these are great. It's great to hear what's happening and the energy and authenticity that folks are putting into this effort. I think for us, one of the things is we're talking about community is to think about how privilege is situated, how social capital is situated, and I think when we talk with our students and begin to talk about how where they're coming from and how we're trying as a university to quote level the playing field, particularly with underrepresented low-income students, by expanding their social capital. With those who come with financial capital, and we have those students, it's about bridging the gap between their income levels and those who they're coming to collaborate with. And when they become practitioners, being collaborators and reaching out to folks who don't come with the same privilege that they have. So I think that's an important thing to recognize, that we're servicing all of our students, but I think the idea of community within the school, part of it is to build social capital for those who lack the financial capital and wealth to operate at the levels that other students are. And for those other students, it's to see in an empathetic, not in a sympathy way, but to expand their horizons and become more humane as they become practitioners.
Yeah. One of the ways, again, maybe this is obvious, but of doing that is to think about the curriculum, or at least the studio sequence, as issue-based as opposed to typology-based, right? Like we're not designing this building and then we're going to teach you designing this building and then that building. We're teaching you about the issues that are in play in the arc of any kind of, in the built environment. And I think that's actually a fundamental sort of difference that architecture schools need to sort of bend towards.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the shift towards educating students around studios that focus on breadth and depth at the same time, and do it in a way where the question is somewhat more open-ended, to define problems, to be able to answer them. But I think the other part of this question about the citizenship that you raised is interesting, because I do think there is a shift happening where some of the faculty research is now becoming directed towards metrics that are associated with working in the community. And so it doesn't have to stay in service anymore. It can really become a kind of focused area of research. I've seen ACSA supporting that, and I think it's a really good thing to evolve it past something that's just about service and can really be understood as an area of research.
Please.
I think that one important point, like we are trying to show students the way, right? And one of the ways that we can do that immediately, let's say, or we have control of, is to make sure that the faculty also represents the student body that we serve. I think a lot of universities, particularly School of Architecture, should reevaluate the way that they measure what makes a good faculty that is specific to their universities. So we all have great credentials, but who will best serve our students? Who will our students see themselves in, right? I think it's very important for them to see that they can actually get there. If they enter a classroom and they don't see themselves, we can talk all we want, and it won't happen. And so it's very important when we take these kind of initiatives.
I just want to say something about recognizing engaged scholarship in promotion and tenure cases. I mean, I think this conversation has been going on for a while. I mean, even 15 years ago at my previous institution, Syracuse, Nancy Cantor was one of the first chancellors that was doing scholarship in action. And so the changes to those processes happen from the top down, from the chancellor's office to the provost to the schools. At Buffalo, which was founded as a medical college, 1846, it's a very different idea of research and scholarship. And so this sort of work is coming from within the school and working its way up to the provost's office. So I think there's different ways that it matters relative to, the value system of the institution.
Please, Kyle.
Yeah, I think what Julia described as being top-down in terms of declaring that type of work has value in promotion and tenure. It's not happening so much at Syracuse anymore, and so I think we're kind of going from the school up. And when we authored our strategic plan last year, one of the commitments that we authored in was to become a reliable partner to our communities in the Syracuse area. And the ways in which we can do that are through part of the question that you asked, which is faculty retention and faculty support. And so not only do we have this document now that we can use to help us make strategic hires, to make sure not only that we have faculty in the building that can do that work in a meaningful way, but that they have resources. And I think once the school has declared a commitment to that, it helps, I think, with those, especially with promotion and tenure, that's something that we've said has value to us. And helping those faculty and then the university understand what metrics we've kind of recalibrated to make sure that that's part of the equation.
Yeah, I just would say that on a social engagement, citizen architect, thank you, Gabrielle, that's great. And I copied your feed the populace, Haley. We do that down at Spitzer, although not every week. Maybe we'll be able to get that done. But food is really important. But I would critically in building community, we also provide a first-year kit to first-year students, to every first-year student coming in, to deal with this question of facing the enormous cost of going to architecture school. But on the engagement side, ACSA, June Williamson is up there, and incoming president, and ACSA has issued a new position paper in which community engagement is offered as one of the criteria by which faculty in architecture schools can be assessed for tenure. And I urge everybody to take a look at that. It's really, really useful, along with other research, in technology, whatever. I would say that with regard to thinking, I really appreciate your comment about sociologists, political scientists, and anthropologists, and all kinds of folk doing community engagement for some time, but architects don't come with PhDs for the most part that are grounded in the social science skills that one needs to advance that work. And so there are irritations there and challenges that need to be thought about. And one group that's been really helpful for us is the Dean's Equity, the DEII group that Mellon founded, that Thaisa Way chairs at Dumbarton Oaks, hosted by Harvard's program down there. And it's in Washington. And it's been a fantastic program for bringing faculty of color at all sorts of universities, all sorts of programs dealing with the built environment, from landscape to planning to architecture to landscape architecture, you name it. Junior faculty, they invite and subsidize, invite a core group of faculty to come. They're on their 5th cohort. We've sent faculty meet each other. They learn skill sets for advancing their tenure and promotion cases. They network and they support each other. And it's a fantastic program for helping diverse faculty coming into architecture and other allied programs figure out ways to survive. It works for retention, let me tell you.
It's called Built Environment Deans Advancing.
Yes.
Yeah. Today we heard. So I just have to we should all be involved.
Yeah, it's a great panel. I was just gonna answer. So, for example, I was gonna bring up the ACSA. I think there are tools and people now helping. Especially there are schools. Being in an art and design school, usually my provost understands these things, and we don't have an issue. And we're also lucky that civic engagement is actually one of the pillars of our strategic plan. In no small part, thanks to the legacy that the planning department and architecture department have built in the school. But since you're part of this conversation is also about institutional change and how we're changing. One of the things that I find interesting about what we're hearing is that partly authorship, and no matter whether it's with civic engagement or technology, AI, there are many tools now that there's much more collaboration and even a certain amount of pluralism coming into all these conversations, and then it becomes interesting to think about how we make sure that the students get the knowledge they need while understanding that not all, that their portfolio is going to be shared, right? So how to begin to because many ways like in Yale, most of our studios are group studios, not all, but a lot of them. So I think that one of the shifts that we're beginning to think through and see, I think in academia as a whole, is how that more collaborative approach both works for, again, promotion, because typically they want you to say, I did this, right? But also for grades, for the way that we work together, the way that we even lead, right? Like how we bring other parts of our teams together. And increasingly, I think one of the things that has been really interesting, and actually we're talking today about how to bring staff more into some of the processes that we're creating.
I wanted to just put a coda on that the same issues that exist with people promoting on this work exist with hiring this kind of faculty, right? And if you haven't seen Dori Tunstall's brilliant work, Diversity by Design, Decolonizing Design, sorry, she really breaks it down in there about how to do this the right way. Like, there's literally a map now, and this idea of, she really challenges the idea of what is a credential in it to be able to get a job, right? Like, what if having done 5 years out in community at a high level is the same thing as having a PhD? Right? And she literally has a chart that like lines these things up, and that's how she was able to hire 6 indigenous faculty and 5 black faculty all at once, because she had to break down that system. I mean, surprise, the systems work against these things, you know, and you have to like super nerd out and get deep into that stuff to actually make this happen. And it is across the entire academic system that you need to like get deep in and challenge the traditions to make this stuff happen. And it is hard. I've been trying for 4 years and it is very hard. So there's so much good intention, but it's not, it's going to be a generation's work to fix it. So.
Thank you so much. So again, we're going to bring in the audience for questions. But one thing I want to note that I've loved about this conversation, so we had like 3 themes going in, and it was just so organic how we flowed through all of them. The last theme was beyond the studio, and clearly that's been a through line throughout the entire conversation. And so now we open it up to questions from the audience to continue the discussion.
I have a question. I come from a liberal arts background, which I notice is not up there, but I teach architecture, and I've been engaging the students in a book by John Palfrey out of Columbia. I think he's a political theorist. And it's about safe spaces, brave spaces, about the importance of exclusionary spaces and inclusionary spaces. And it doesn't take like a ton of cognitive pliancy to realize that you need to have one to have the other, right? We can all like realize that. But I was wondering, as I reflect on my own ideas of inclusionary pedagogy, curriculum, staffing, all that kind of stuff, is there a place that we're missing where we need to talk about exclusionary spaces? I mean, I know that there's not like a lot of political capital, or donors don't like to hear we're creating all these exclusionary ways of thinking about protecting space, protecting things. I was wondering if any of you have started to engage in that rhetoric, thought, ways of rolling out new teaching or thinking.
The only thing I can think of to respond to is our neurodiversity work. So creating spaces in our building for neurodiverse students, which are really intended for only those students, to be able to, for them to have a safe space to relax, chill out, collect themselves. So we're working on creating that's a trend across many design schools to have those spaces, which someone could see. I don't love the word exclusionary, but I guess you could talk about it as quote unquote exclusionary.
Sorry. Bill, you can, oh, that side, okay, all right.
Does this work? Yeah, okay. Hi, Anthony Samaha. My full-time job is running the digital practice department here at Perkins and Will in New York, and working in the firm-wide full thing. I also teach at Pratt GAUD, a computational design course, fourth year. It's going very strong. Used to teach building tech with Sanjeev. And I'm inspired by what was said that's happening at Yale for the multidisciplinary and hirings and things like that. I'm a big proponent of hiring in architecture outside of architecture. We hire anthropologists and things like that. And a very unique opportunity that I had in undergrad, actually at NJIT, after being taught for 4 semesters in a row by Gabrielle, was that I was able to take my own self-guided year, pretty much, away from studio, being able to explore the resources at the university that I was at, which at NJIT is 10,000 hyper nerds, right, trying to explore all facets of science and medicine and business. I'm curious what seeds you plant inside of your program to allow for that sort of growth, because personally I find that probably accelerated my career by about 5 years, being a very young educator myself, right?
Good question. I think it speaks to also expanding students' agency. One of the things I've been really impressed with coming back to Cornell is seeing Dean Yoon, her initiative to expand the college from architecture, art, and planning, we now call those our legacy departments, to now include design, tech, and real estate. We're split between 2 campuses, our Cornell Tech campus, where we're moving all of our assets in New York, and design tech is part of Cornell Tech, and then of course our Ithaca campus. But the real estate program, which is now totally, well, it's between us and it's partnership between us and the business school. I'm very proud of what is happening there in its transformation. So it's going to allow students to do a 1-year, BARC students to do with 1 additional year to get a Master of Real Estate. And that program is going to be partnering more so with our other departments, including architecture. We have a new chair. We're very excited about Jose Castillo from Mexico City. So I really see much more fluidity across the 5 departments, our legacy departments and our new departments. And design tech is a very, it's kind of product design, industrial design, technology at multiple scales, biology. So the students are really driving the train. They want to actually move across much more quickly and much more fluidly than the current siloed curriculum is allowing them to do. But I think we're moving in that direction. I think it's very positive.
If I could, yeah, I think this is so what we hear so much from students is that they want to get out of the siloed environment. And I think my last position was being Associate Dean of Curriculum Learning, and we were really looking at our elective offerings across the university and across the school and how they address issues around breadth and depth. And I think that piece is really fascinating because some students want to go so deep into their area of interest, and others want to be a generalist, and it sounds like you may have had that ability to have that experience. And both of those need to be valid and need to be supported. And so I think what we've done is our students in my school, they all get to review the elective proposals. So they all weigh in on whether this has value. Because I think sometimes we think that we're proposing a really great idea and a great elective. They have very different ideas about that. So I think giving that student agency, not only in how they think about the courses and the curriculum, but how they identify their own path through this idea of breadth and depth has been one of our focuses.
Go ahead, Sanjeev. You first. Okay, so at City College, it happens through the old-fashioned mechanism of taking a minor. Or taking a minor in another department. We have students who take minors in sociology, in philosophy, in art. Works well. We also opened an urban studies non-design major in our program within Spitzer in order to accommodate and serve the students who decided that they wanted to learn about the built environment, but they didn't want to be designers. And so we felt it was important to accommodate them within the school, and also to create space for conversation between those groups. We also place students in fellowship programs, particularly in the Collin Powell School, which
is the East Harlem Science School.
I-
So it happens.
Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting about your question is it adds really a kind of third trajectory to core education, which is you identify something maybe later in your career that's like, wow, that's what I want to do. And so I think a good curriculum has the capacity to provide that. The minors are certainly one possibility. We have something called the undergraduate research program, that means you can go and study directly with the faculty on their research in that area for credit. And that's been incredibly attractive, but it also is changing as the research is changing with the faculty. And it also brings students in contact with PhD students. So the knowledge is also in the collaboration with other students in the specialty areas. And we also have, an additional year, right, which is studying lighting and acoustics, which we also have programs in. So I think to me, this was something I hadn't experienced before being at a research institution, which is that research becomes a kind of limb of the teaching experience.
I think one thing I'd like to add is our program is located right on the edge of Dumbo, and so that puts us in this very weird sort of look but don't touch, because the students are seeing some of the most interesting innovations in technology and design in that area. And I want to bring it back to some very financial, pragmatic thoughts, because 60% of our students come from households earning less than $30,000. That is just slightly above the federal guideline for poverty. So I do talk about things from a financial lens because it's about survival for them. The New York Building Congress predicts construction spending in 2025-26 at $112 billion. $112 billion, while the Buildings Index for architecture has flatlined for the last 18 months. So what it says is that your question is very important, and it's important for us as educators to build stakeholders, because without having these students with some financial literacy, some awareness of how to be civically engaged, politically aware, they can be run over roughshod. And so building stakeholders is a really big part of our program, and we are really close to Dumbo. We have started initiatives with the Brooklyn Navy Yards to do some fabrication and sort of model after C2 Studios, has been developing forensic architecture and a lot of really advanced uses of the skills that we see in our program. But I think that's a really important question, and it's good for us to learn how to expand and grow out of the silos that we have in design schools.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say at the Weitzman School of Design, very popular avenues for this kind of cross-disciplinary are both our dual majors and then our certificates. So if you're in the MArch program, you can align your free electives in any of the other departments and obtain a certificate, or if you would like, very popular is landscape architecture and architecture, but there's also Wharton MBA and historic preservation, fine arts, and any of these. So you can couple them, for a much shorter time and much less expensive than getting those dual degrees. Or if you want the certificate, it's maybe the graduate equivalent of the minor in that sense.
I think we have time for a few more questions. Dr. Sutton, Saturday.
I have a fast comment and then a question. So my fast comment is that practically everybody at the table has talked all evening about partners. The partners are missing. We've expanded the number of deans, which is great. It's wonderful to hear all of the stories of what's happening at all of the schools and to see the diversity of deans in our metropolitan area. But we have a missing character, whether the partner is your other people in your institution, the city agencies, the funders, or the what, and just put that in your hat. My question is, Kyle took my imagination early in the conversation, and then Jason put the cap on it. You said architecture is a tool of wealth production. You said that it is hard to change the system of wealth production, architecture as wealth production. And you said, Milton, that we're always starting from behind. So, and all of the comments that you've given about how to get out of the silo are extra time. The core of architecture being about the accredited core don't change. The accredited program allows very little in the way of electives. It teaches you, and I think the teaching architecture as a tool of wealth production is the turnoff for many working class students. So I'm wondering, how can we change what you mentioned?
I think I'll make it clear I'm not advocating for architecture to remain in that position. It relates, yeah, I think to Milton's point earlier about architecture being too late to the process, and I think there's a couple of ways in which that can be altered. One is that if we continue to equip our students with more knowledge and awareness of how other fields operate, they can learn to better provoke those fields to do better, or they can become a part of those fields. I think architectural education is so wonderful and so varied, and it equips our students with critical thinking skills. They can design, they can visualize. If they can apply those skills in other fields that are earlier in the process, like planning, like policy, like development, I think our very students can help us further.
Do you think architecture should be a tool of wealth production?
No, of course not.
So how do we get out of that?
I think we have to change how development occurs. There needs to be different incentives for developers to allow empathy to be valued differently in their field. And I think if we educate our students properly and they find their way into those fields, they can be the instrument of change in fields that are higher up in the food chain that make decisions well before architects even enter the room. And I guess in the end, I'm advocating for us to send some of our students away from architecture so that architecture, I mean, it's related to the second question, so that when the project gets to the architect, if they can't involve themselves earlier, there's a better setup.
Great question, of course, the great Sharon Sutton. One thought experiment would be to say that, I mean, we've been talking about community engagement and work that's done on behalf of or with communities, community organizations, cities in some cases. It's been quite a broad term. But I think if we redefine what is the public good, if you start there and say the public good, whatever it is, constitutes shared equity, shared wealth. And if you can make that determination and broaden the definition of what is a public good, I think you can change part of the system. You know, what's undergirding capitalism is the building is a commodity. The building is an asset that builds wealth, whether it's your single-family house or whether it's, you know, Stephen Ross's real estate development. So we're creating the value. We're not getting a fair share of the value, but I think if we said, you know, what is the public good? And if you define a portion of more developments as being in the public good, then the share of that, as that cascades down, should be shared equity, whether it be the city or whether it be community groups, et cetera. That may be one starting point, but it's an important question that we should wrestle with.
I will say that, I mean, education is the place to reimagine that. I mean, and it might create wealth, but maybe wealth is shared. Maybe it's community wealth. All of us are in different ways. It also allows us opportunities to begin to take a look at places where it's working differently. I think that one of the things that we're doing a lot of research on is housing and cooperatives, you know, like co-living opportunities, and beginning to look at other places, because sometimes especially in the U.S., there's a lot of specific kind of things that allow it. Before, you know, La Col in Spain, that is beginning to create not only new cooperative spaces and participating in a new economic model, but itself is a cooperative. And then the design itself of the thing is beginning to show some of the outcomes. We recently brought Alejandro Echeverri, the architect urban planner that made all the changes that made Medellin, Colombia, what it has become, as a way of talking about the power of architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, to transform social situations. And I keep thinking about it in the context of our election and how the post-industrial Midwest needs so much thinking right now that if we don't take care of it, fascism is coming out of it, right? And the role of potentially like the tools we have to participate in new economic models as part of that.
So I want to push back a bit, Sharon, and say that I think architecture is absolutely about wealth creation because architecture sits within a capitalist real estate system economic system that we all know about. I'm interested in education as wealth creation, and my students are. My students are students, and there is a difference between us on this count, are coming to our schools, to Sanjeev's, to my school. They come from New York City public schools. They are principally immigrant, first generation, people of color, and they are definitely coming to college to create wealth, and I think that's fine. And I would say that we're succeeding. City College is #1 in the country in advancing social mobility for graduates. That's damn impressive, and I'm for it.
We have time for one final question.
Thank you. My name is William Singer. We've heard a lot tonight about community. We've heard very little about policy. Policy was mentioned twice, and politics was mentioned once. Every one of you lives in a city that has community boards, city councilmen. How many of your students are participating in the community experience? New York City has 59 community boards with 10 committees on each community board. There are 590 positions that students could be assigned to each year or more to participate and learn how the political system works, where policy is made. You're talking about implementing change. Do it through the political system. You're not teaching your students how to do this. How many classes, how many universities are teaching how the city government is made up and how policy works? How is zoning made? So, teach your students.
I would say that our students work in public agencies. They work in the Department of Buildings.
That's great.
They work for DEC. They work for city planning. They work for landmarks.
Excellent.
They
Excellent.
make up the gut of our. That's where they want to work. So I'm proud of that. That's
Civic.
Faculty is incredibly important as part of that too. For example,
That's right.
Our faculty members are part of the planning committee.
That's
and
right.
They have these kind of.
But the students should be there too. I'm just making that as an assignment for you all to take back to your constituency.
We are coming up on time.
Maybe you want to hear a different perspective and question at the same time?
Yes. Yeah, okay. We will take one final question, but then
One final question.
Thank you.
Yes. I respectfully disagree with your wealth creation and all that. I'm not in the profession. I'm here because my son he has a passion for architecture. So I said, I'm going to join you. Architecture is the bottom of, if you look all the professions, at the bottom of wealth creation. You want to make money, you go to finance, biotechnology, all this. Architecture is different thing. We talked about community and social justice and all that, and that's fine. But really want to create, like, breakthrough social justice? Years ago, I read a story, and probably you all know this lady. In the early 80s, there was an architect who basically came and designed. She thought, okay, I go to open the refrigerator, and someone who is 40, 50 years old can open it. So she was dressed like 60, 65 years old, and then she completely changed the design of all the products. I mean, the value that this lady did, this colleague of yours, I don't know how you measure that. Or the designers that came up 20 years ago when they designed software for Microsoft, for people can't see or the eyes and all. They came up with these designs. So the idea is, let's not focus what's the primary objective of an architecture school is. Create great thinkers, come up with innovative solutions to so many problems we have. Can you cut the energy by 30% with a new design? That's social justice. And I can go on and on. Now, the other question is on the technical aspect that in the wealth creation is, I don't know if the schools are thinking what will happen in 5, 10 years on the technical aspect with AI. Why anyone will need the capitalist system, why they will need architects to sit on AutoCAD or some other program my son uses hours and hours when they will just say a word and then the building is done. Just some thoughts of different perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we do need to wrap up because the building's about to close. I would like to make a request that folks who are in the back half of the room, who have had a much harder time raising their hand and asking questions, I would love to give them the opportunity, now that we are wrapping, to be the first people who can come up and engage with the deans the last few minutes that we have here. So just want to mention that. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you for your questions. And if you want to wrap up.
Yes. Couldn't say it better myself. Thank you so much to our distinguished institutional leaders. Thank you all for your time and attention and questions. Thank you all.